Welcome to First Parish in Framingham. We are a welcoming congregation. So whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We welcome you on Zoom or wherever and whenever you may be watching the service in the future. I'm Deborah Dubourdieu. I use she, her pronouns, and I am your worship associate this morning. Please be sure to read the announcements in the chat, the meeting chat. And immediately following worship, you are invited to join us for a Zoom coffee hour. The link will be sent to you. For most of the service, we will have other participants muted. During our time for sharing, we will allow others to unmute to share. Since 1701, people have gathered as this community in various formats to rest or recharge, to be challenged or armed. Those people are like you. You belong here. Maybe only for the next hour, but we hope for longer. We are happy to have you with us. I now invite you to take a deepening breath in and out. Continue to take a few more breaths. And begin to release whatever you need to let go of, to be more fully present to yourself, one another, and the sacred in this time and place. A flame within a chalice is a primary symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. To symbolize the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope, it is our tradition to begin our worship by kindling the flame of our chalice. Our chalice reading today is Shoveling Snow with Buddha by Billy Collins. In the usual iconography of the temple or the local walk, you would never see him doing such a thing. Tossing the dry snow over a mountain of his bare, round shoulder, his hair tied in a knot, a model of concentration. Sitting is more his speed, if that is the word for what he does or does not do. Even the season is wrong for him. In all his manifestations, is it not warm or slightly humid? Is this not implied by his serene expression? That smile so wide, it wraps itself around the waist of the universe. But here we are, working our way down the driveway, one shovelful at a time. We toss the light powder into the clear air. We feel the cold mist on our faces. And with every heave, we disappear and become lost to each other in these sudden clouds of our own making, these fountain bursts of snow. This is so much better than a sermon in church, I say out loud. But the Buddha keeps on shoveling. This is the true religion, the religion of snow and sunlight and winter geese barking in the sky, I say. But he is too busy to hear me. He has thrown himself into shoveling snow as if it were the purpose of existence, as if the sign of a perfect life were a clear driveway you could back the car down easily and drive off into the vanities of the world with a broken heater fan and a song on the radio. All morning long, we work side by side, me with my commentary, and he inside his generous pocket of silence, until the hour is nearly noon and the snow is piled high all around us. Then I hear him speak. After this, he asks, can we go inside and play cards? Certainly, I reply, and I will heat some milk and bring cups of hot chocolate to the table while you shuffle the deck. And our boots stand dripping by the door. Ah, says the Buddha, lifting his eyes and leaning for a moment on his shovel, before he drives the thin blade again deep into the glittering white snow. Please type into the chat, the chalice is lit in our home, or the chalice is lit in my home.
We will now hear our hymn. The lyrics will be up on the screen, so feel free to sing along. This is a video from last year, so don't worry, there's nobody in the meeting house. It's just a recording from our service last year. And immediately following that will be the sung affirmation and the spoken affirmation. So join along. Again, we won't unmute anybody because that creates too much of a cacophony. We don't need that. So.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Strauss. I'm the Director of Religious Exploration here at First Parish. I use she, her pronouns. I would love to say with you all, good morning. Oh gosh, and welcome to church. And today I have for you a story called The End is Just the beginning. It's a book of endless possibilities written by Mike Bender and illustrated by Diana Mayo. You can turn the page. The end. That's right. You read it correctly. You've reached the end and the beginning. But wait, how can a book possibly start with the end? That's ridiculous. Well, prepare to have your mind blown because the end isn't really the end. It's just the beginning of something else. Like this beautiful sunset. Sure seems like the end of the day, right? Not so fast. You see, when the sun goes down, it's actually just the beginning of the night. When all the snow melts at the end of winter, that just means it's the beginning of spring. If you try to go to the ends of the earth, you'll actually just keep going back to the beginning because the earth is one big circle. If you blast off in a rocket ship, you'll reach the end of the sky, otherwise known as the beginning of outer space. When you count, the end of one number is just the beginning of the next number, and so on, and so on, and so on, all the way to infinity, which, by the way, never ends. Even a sign that literally says dead end isn't an end at all. It's only just the beginning of whatever lies beyond it. So, when you really think about it, the end is entirely endless. The end of a disagreement with someone is just the beginning of making up. The end of a mistake is just the beginning of learning something new. The end of being sick is just the beginning of feeling better. The end of dinner is just the beginning of dessert. And if you're really well behaved or hungry, the end of dessert might be just the beginning of more dessert. So tonight, when you turn off the lights and go to bed, don't think of it as the end of anything. Just think of it as the beginning of a new tomorrow full of possibilities. The beginning of discovering the next book.
This is the time in our service that we set aside for sharing the things which weigh deepest on our hearts. Our milestones, our happy and sad occasions, we share them because we know that joy shared is joy expanded, and a sorrow shared can feel as though someone is lifting a burden. You can submit the joys or sorrows either online, the email I send out most Thursdays, which a few of you have already. You can also put them in the chat, or we'll even try unmuting you. If you raise your hand, you can briefly share your joy or your sorrow. We had hoped to introduce a new song to sing during this time. We've been singing Comfort Me for at least a year, and I decided it was time to learn a new song. Fortunately, Mother Nature had other plans. So we will hear Lee Kinvey, who's a member of our congregation. They did a wonderful recording of it. We'll hear that during the time for the anthem. Lee, as you might know, is the student minister in residence at my home church, the First Parish Church of Groton. I begin with the sorrows of our gathered community. Ellen and Charlie Cormier share this sorrow about the death of Charlie's 90-year-old brother, his last remaining brother leaving his sister and Charlie. May his memory be for a blessing. We share this sorrow with Ben Long, who writes that he has recovered or is recovering from COVID, and he is sorry to miss the service today. It looks like he is indeed not online, so obviously submitted when we thought that was going to be in person. Are there any other joys or sorrows that people, or sorrows, just sorrows right now, that people wish to share? I'll read that in the chat. I'm sad that my friend's husband, who needed a double transplant, died unexpectedly a few days ago. He was in his 40s. Are there other joys, are there other sorrows that people wish to share? Having scrolled through, we will now share the joys of our congregation. I share this joy from Sarah, who writes, I am happy to report that my husband Pat is doing better after his cranial surgery. Are there any others? Vanessa writes that she was glad to see the documentary Drive to Sing yesterday. Scrolling through the gallery, I don't see any other raised hands. So I invite you now to move into this time that we set aside for contemplation, meditation, and prayer. Return to that comfortable breath that we invited you to pay attention to at the beginning of our service. Feel what is supporting you, whether it is a chair or a bed or the strength of this community. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls us each by our true first name, which is beloved. We give thanks for this community, for the warmth that it provides, for the warmth that we have, for dear ones healing after surgery, for documentaries seen. We give thanks. We give thanks for all that we have. We know that it did not have to be this way. We give thanks for sheltering walls. May we be emboldened to find some way to provide shelter to all who need it. We know too that in our community there are people who go without, there are people who are ill, who are mourning. Mourning the death of loved ones, recovering from illness. Let us have the courage to reach out and lend a listening ear. We know too that our world is beautiful and it is also broken. Let us work to wage peace in all of the war-torn parts of our world. Let us work to bend the arc of the universe towards justice. From time to time, we slip up and trip up with our words. We say things that put distance between ourselves and others. May we be reminded that because we are still alive, there is still time to move back into right relationship. Still time to say, I am sorry. And may we be reminded that we are loved not in spite of these imperfections, but because of them. May all that is holy hear our prayers. And let us sit in our separate quiets for just 1 minute to pray the prayers of our own hearts or to simply listen. May it be so. May the silence that we have shared here carry us through the rest of our weeks.
As we prepare to take this morning's offering, may each of us look not into just our wallets or our checkbooks to see how much we have with us. Let us look into our hearts as well and see what is available there. How much love, how much generosity, how much faith, how much gratitude, how much hope, and let us take our offering from that account. If this is your first time joining us, you are invited to let the offering pass you by.
There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in is love.
As you know, we had some ritual objects that we were going to use for our next two rituals. Unfortunately, they are back at 24 Vernon Street, locked up, and we are in our own separate homes. So as I read the next poem, if you have not already done so, I invite you to get 2 pieces of paper per person on the screen and a writing implement. Our reading today is The Invitation by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals or become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fix it or fade it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, to be realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it is not pretty every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the sliver of the full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me who you are or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else fails away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you can truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. Now, originally, we had planned 2 rituals of letting go and holding on. As I said before, Mother Nature had different plans. So if you do wish to participate with the objects that we were planning on, dissolving paper and rocks, those will be available after the service next week in Scott Hall. I want to tell you a story that I have told you before. The story of rain falling on the mountain. And rain falls as rain must, without calculation, without practice. The rain, it continues to fall, going through, hitting the ground and becoming a stream. There are sticks and stones, rocks in the stream bed. The stream is singing now because the stream that is interrupted by rocks sings most nobly. And then the water gets to the desert, and it wants to go across the desert, but it gets stuck in the swamp at the base of the mountain. And the rain complains, because this is the kind of story where the elements can talk. The rain says, I want to cross the desert. It keeps on saying this again and again and again. Then the wind speaks up. For this is a kind of story where the wind and the rain can talk to one another. And the wind says, well, you cannot get to where you need to go if you remain who you are. Either give yourself over to the wind or stay in the swamp. And the rain, being stubborn as rain and water is, says no. I want to remain water. The wind gently blows again, whispering, you cannot get to where you need to go if you remain who you are. Either give yourself over to the wind or stay in the swamp. And finally, the rain, getting tired of being in the swamp, gives itself over to the wind. The rain transforms into water vapor, crosses the desert as a cloud, where again falls on the mountain. Rain falls as rain must, without calculation or practice. The stream interrupted by rocks is the one that sings most nobly. You cannot get where you want to be by remaining who you are. So on those 2 sheets of paper I asked you to get, I invite you now to write on 1 sheet of paper what you wish to release from the previous year. While this ritual may not allow yourself to fully release all that is weighing on your heart, it could be a step in that direction. Once you have written what you wish to let go of, I invite you to crumple that piece of paper up and to dispose of it in some way. Throw it in the trash. If you have a fire going, throw it in the fire. Something to release what you need to release from 2023. I invite you to do this now. I will give you one more moment to write down in whatever shorthand is known only to you what you need to let go of. In a way, I suppose Unitarian Universalism is a religion that's based on letting go. It's a religion that is based on being open, based on walking or moving away from preconceived notions, letting go of all the answers or all the questions. A religion that many years ago let go of a creed, and a few years after that let go of drawing from one sacred text. Many religions have a concept of letting go. There's confession in the Christian tradition, the ritual of tashlik during Yom Kippur, where people of the Jewish faith cast small pieces of bread or breadcrumbs into bodies of water as a way to atone. There's also the concept in Buddhism of dukkha. My colleague, the Reverend Elizabeth Tarbox, writes about it beautifully. Dukkha, they say, all is dukkha. The Buddhists say it's hard to translate, they tell us. It literally means suffering, but the feeling of dukkha is more close to impermanence. The fact of impermanence is central to the Buddhist path to nirvana, enlightenment. All is impermanence. Nothing lasts. Now we move to our ritual of holding on, of intention setting. I begin with a story written by Stephen Covey, the leadership and business consultant. You have to picture a professor, a teacher, standing in front of a group of high-powered achievers. They say, okay, it's time for a quiz. They pull out this 1 gallon wide mouth mason jar and set it on the table in front of them. Then they produce about a dozen fist-sized rocks, and they carefully place them one at a time into the jar. When the jar is now full to the top and no more rocks would fit inside, they ask, is this jar full? And everyone in the class says yes. The professor says, really? He reached out from under the table and pulled out a bucket of gravel. He dumped the gravel into the jar, shook the jar, causing a few pieces of gravel to work themselves into the spaces between the rocks. Then they smiled and asked the group once more, is the jar full? The class was on to them by now. Probably not, one answered. Good, they replied. And they reached under the table and brought out a bucket of sand. They started dumping sand in it, and it went into all the places left between the rocks and the gravel. Once more they asked the question, is this jar full? No, the class shouted. Once again they said good, and then they grabbed a pitcher of water and began to pour it into the jar until it was full to the brim. They looked up at the class and said, what is the point of this illustration? One very eager student raised their hand and said, the point is, no matter how full your schedule is, if you try really hard, you can always fit more things into it. And the professor said, no, it's not the point. The truth this illustration teaches us is that it doesn't matter if you put the big rocks in first, if you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never get to them all. What are the big rocks in your life? A project you want to accomplish, time with your loved ones, your faith, your education, a cause, teaching or mentoring others? Remember to put these big rocks in first, or you'll never get to them all. When I hear this story, the other thing that I think about is rocks as ballast, rocks as something to keep a ship or a boat upright in the midst of tumult and strife. And normally, if we were in person, I'd invite you to write something down on a rock. But you don't have rocks unless you do, in which case that's fine. But I now invite you on that second piece of paper or a rock or something else to write down a word that you hope to use as ballast, as a touchstone, as an intention in the coming days. Just one word, or 2 or 3, but 3 probably at the most. Once you've written it down, and if you feel comfortable, I invite you to share that word in the chat so others can see what words are serving as words of intention for 2024. If you are having a hard time picking a word, head over to the chat. There's a lot of great words there. Words like calm, well-being, self-confidence, deep breath, hope, gratitude, and contentment. 80% rule, love, openness, service, authenticity, gratitude, see the good, listening to my inner voice, open, friendship, listening, kindness, friends. once you have written it down on the sheet of paper, I invite you to put it where you will see it the most. In a previous congregation, when we do this on rocks, I learned that one member of my congregation who had been there for the 3 years that I had been there had placed the stones behind on the backsplash, behind where he did the dishes each night, as a way to remind him of what he had committed to over those 3 years. You might put it above a light switch that you turn on or off every day, maybe in the corner of the mirror in your bathroom, or in your wallet or purse. Generosity and compassion as well, all good words. I like to think of New Year's Day as a day of intention. It is, after all, a thing that is capitalized on by business. Gym memberships soar. New kinds of planners are out there promising to help you use your time in the best possible way. Ads about dieting go everywhere, and largely they don't hold up. The efficacy of New Year's resolutions is indeed poor at best. A writer from an Ohio State University said, researchers suggest that only 9% of Americans that make resolutions complete them. In fact, the research goes on to say that 23 people quit their resolution by the end of the first week, and 43 quit by the end of January. An Australian study found that the typical reasons for failing a New Year's resolution were that the goal was unrealistic, that they were unable to keep track of their progress, or that they just forgot about them. Others said that they made too many resolutions. So if you are in that camp, if you are one of the 43 that has quit by the end of January, or the 23 that has quit by right about now, you're in good company. This is all why I want to consider intentions instead of resolutions. It's about the things that balance you and the direction that you go in. So I want to share some of my intention words for this year: create, connect, and focus. I'm choosing create as a word because I miss creating things, whether it's music or poetry or visual arts. In 2024, I'm going to try to make sure I make the time to create more beautiful things, as my poster behind me by Saul Bass says. Another word I want to pick is connect. I want to spend more time cultivating friendships, weak tie friends, and a little more focus on contact. Becoming a more intentional husband, son, brother, uncle, cousin, and mentor. I also want to take the time to do a few more civic-minded things, like joining a service organization, doing service out in the community, reconnecting with scouting on a local level, maybe even signing up to work on an election, checking people in, checking voters in. Finally, focus. I tend to rush things. Some days I don't have a lot of get up and go, and some of the intention here is about making sure that I am healthy, but other parts are about not using social media as much. Another part of this focus is about resting better. I'm guilty of using my phone way too late at night. I also want to become better at keeping Sabbath days holy and restful. My friends gathered here all on your separate devices, as I wrap up this first sermon of the new year, it makes sense to consider, what do you need to let go of from 2023? During this time, we have also considered the things that will provide us balance and ballast. May we go forth into this new year with our loads lightened, but also perhaps balanced in a new way. May it be so, and amen. We will now hear our final hymn, which is My Life Flows On, an Endless Song. Again, this is from last January. So let us get the screen share up. So as our service draws to an end, I invite you in this new year to continue to be amazed. Let us search for new life and hope in our midst. Let us nurture creativity in every form. Let us be reminded that new insights of the world around us are always being made. In this new year, let us be amazed, and as we leave this friendly place, let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always and the light hold us always. Now we'll listen to some music from Dean, and then after that we will continue our coffee hour on Zoom.